Well, today on Fast Track, we've seen that the kingdom is now divided.
It is between the northern and the southern kingdom, Israel and Judea.
And I think that's where a lot of people get confused because what was the nation of Israel now has two different names. So the northern kingdom is called Israel now, and the southern kingdom is called Judah because of the tribe of Judah. And it's during this time that actually two prophets begin to speak.
Yes.
Now, later on, Ezekiel will tell us that they've got some pretty bad kings. So much so that the northern kingdom has 390 years of rebellion.
That's no good.
That's a lot of rebellion.
It's a lot, yeah.
In fact, poor Elijah's going to have to lay on his side for 390 days because of the rebellion. Then he's going to flip and lay on his other side for 40 days.
That's Elijah?
No, this is Ezekiel many years later. He'll have to lay on his other side for 40 days because the southern kingdom rebelled for 40 years.
Wow.
390 years and 40 years.
That's a long time.
Now, it's during this time of the kings that God is still trying to get his people's attention through two prophets, Elijah and
Elisha.
That's right.
That's confusing.
Yeah, it is confusing. I need to come up with some better names.
Yeah.
So Elijah, you got a chance to actually be there at the very location he challenged the prophets of Baal. So tell us, what was that like to hike up in that area and to hear that, imagine that speech being said by him at the actual location?
So, we get to the construction site, and there's nowhere for actually to park the bus.
A construction site.
Yes. And we park on the side of the road on a highway.
Okay.
Very safe.
So they drop you off, a bunch of students.
Yeah. So we start hiking up gravel roads up to this construction site.
Okay.
And we get to this beautiful olive grove with
really?
all of these huge olive trees that have been cut down, and they're working on getting them ready for the next 400 years.
Oh, I remember seeing pictures of them, like the olive trees, like this big around kind of thing. Yeah, massive. Okay.
And the guy that we're following says, "Wait here, I'll be right back." Gets up, runs up the hill, and then we don't see him for 5 minutes.
Up. Yeah. Okay.
10 minutes. 15 minutes pass by. 20 minutes, we have three guys decide they're going to go try to go find him because they're worried that he disappeared. Yeah. Then all of a sudden, we hear a voice.
A voice crying out.
And he starts quoting the story of how Elijah called these prophets of Baal to come up and challenge him, to call down fire from heaven and consume a sacrifice on an altar.
Yeah, and it's such a powerful story because Elijah pretty much says, whichever God answers by fire is the one true God. And he actually makes it incredibly hard by dumping water on top of his sacrifice.
Gallons and gallons of water on this altar, and all of a sudden, fire comes down, burns up the water, the altar, and the sacrifice.
Does that mean we get to do a fire science trick?
No.
Okay, well, I was kind of hoping. Well, then Elijah has this incredible victory where he's able to come about and get the people to say, oh my goodness, God is the one true God. 400 prophets of Baal are sacrificed there, and the people turn back to the one true God. But they don't really respond the way he hopes, right?
No, yeah. So instead of turning back to God, they instead decide to try and kill Elijah.
Yeah, in fact, Jezebel, Ahab's wife, says, hey, you're dead by the end of the day if I don't do unto you what you did unto the prophets. Well, he ends up outrunning Ahab's chariot, right?
Yeah, he hikes up his clothes.
His clothes, yeah.
And takes off running, beats a chariot to the city like 8 or 9 miles away.
Yeah, this guy is strong. This guy's a warrior. And then he ends up going into a deep depression because of this life-threatening moment where Jezebel says he's going to kill him. And so he ends up running, leaving his community behind. He ends
hiding in a cave.
Hiding in a cave. God says, what are you doing here?
To kill him.
Yeah, and he actually says over and over again, I'm no better than my fathers, repeating these lies to himself. And God has to tell him in the midst of that, Elijah, I never said you had to be better than anybody. I want to meet you right where you are. And this is a classic verse in the Bible where it says, God appeared to him in a still, small voice. Well, in the same way that God was working in Elijah's life, he's also working in Elisha's life. And Elisha, one of my favorite stories coming from this section of the Bible, is the story of Elisha that comes to an area that's been completely surrounded by the Syrians. You love the Syrians?
No, not the Syrians.
Yes, the Syrians. Oh my goodness, we're coming again. And the Syrians have surrounded this fortress where the king and the men of Israel are for quite some time, and they're going to starve them out. So there is no food left. Now, they got plenty of food. They got the raisins going on here.
Right, the nature bars.
Everything they need. But here, they're starving to death.
Well, that's no good.
So Elijah shows up. He's here in the city, and he says, I got a prophecy from God. Right now, it's a month wages to have like one meal. But by this time tomorrow, food is going to be aplenty. And the king is like, there is not a chance.
Good luck with that.
Well, in the middle of this story, it tells us there are 4 outcasts. 4 people that used to be accepted in the community. Four people that used to be loved, devoted, warmly welcomed, celebrated by the people.
But what happened?
Well, they're now outcasts.
Oh. Why?
Now, in those days, they were called lepers. We're going to call them outcasts because the outcasts we're going to have that end up being seated outside of the city, our first outcast is MC Hammer. Once loved and adored, and now an outcast. Da-na-na-na, da-na-na-na. You can't touch this. And because he has leprosy, you can't touch this. Because they were so scared that the leprosy was contagious. So they kicked this outcast, this leper, outside of the city. And he's like, oh my goodness, what are you going to do?
Sorry, MC Hammer.
Yeah, sorry, man. Well, another one of these lepers sitting there, we're going to use the
Justin Bieber.
The Biebs, yeah. And you could actually have him seated outside the city, and you could listen in. You could hear him going, baby, 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 baby. So things are not going well for our leper here.
No, not going well for him.
Anything else Biebs might say?
He's sorry. He's tried to change 1,000 times.
You just got to love yourself.
You just got to
love yourself. That's all you got to do. Well, our next outcast here is Miley Cyrus.
Lindsay Lohan.
Oh, this is Lindsay Lohan. Oh, this is Lindsay Lohan. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't recognize her. So Lindsay Lohan, she is also sitting out there, and if you ask her, like, what are you doing out there, Lindsay? Lindsay's like, oh my goodness, there's a bunch of mean girls in the city that kicked me out. They don't like me anymore.
Those mean girls.
Yeah, and our fourth one, again, a girl that we once wanted our daughters to be like, and now not so much so, is Hannah Montana. Miley Cyrus. Also one of our outcasts sitting outside the city. And she too, you ask her, what happened to your life? You used to be loved, used to be so adored. And she says?
She doesn't have the best of both worlds.
Oh, she actually says her life's become a wrecking ball. How about that?
That too.
Yeah. She says somebody took a hammer to her and she tried to lick it and eat it and her tongue fell out or whatever it is. So they're sitting out here and they got a bad choice to make. They say, if we stay here, we're going to die.
If we go in the city,
we're going to starve, right? We're going to die, right? If we go over to the Syrians,
we're probably going to die.
We're probably going to die. So they're asking what to do, and so they turn to outcast number one, and they say, what do you think we should do? And of course he says,
stop.
You got to pray just to make it today. You got to pray just to make it today. So they decide to pray, and they say, you know what? We got a bad choice. What should we do? Should we head in here? Right. At least if we go to the Syrians, we got a chance. So they decide.
I don't know about that. That sounds like a terrible idea.
Look at your options. You know, it's die, or die.
Maybe die.
Yeah. So they took the maybe die over the other two dies. So they decided to head out. But little did they know, that evening when they headed out, that God had the whole Syrian army scared to death by a vision. A sound, actually. God made the sound of armies, and they thought the kingdom of Israel had hired the Egyptians and the Hittites to come in as mercenaries, and so they're out of here.
Oh, okay.
Get rid of those guys. Get rid of those guys. So they are out there, and much to the surprise of Israel, much to the surprise of the outcasts, they show up, and they're like, okay, can we just have a little scrap of, could I have some more? Could I have some more? And like,
just a few
just a little bit of more, yes. And so they come out, and it's like, oh my goodness, look at all this. They're finding money, they're finding food. For the first time in their life, in a long time, they're having like a full belly. More than that, they're having savings. And now they got all this food, and they're like, wow, look how God has provided here. And while they're there celebrating, one of the outcasts, the Biebs, he's like, hey, we need to take this, and we need to go bury it so we have savings the rest of our life. And that's where MC Hammer says, stop. It's hammer time. That's right. That is not appropriate. That is not right. And he gives us a great speech. He says, stop. Today is a day of good news. We can't hold this to ourselves. So they turn and they tell the king, there's food out here. There's food out here. And the king is like, oh, my goodness. He sounded like Admiral Akbar, actually. He's like, it's a trap.
What?
Not a parent trap, Lindsay. It's just a trap. It's not a trap. There's food out here.
There really is.
And MC Hammer's like, come on out here. We got to get us some food. Actually, that's more like Mr. T. That's like Mr. T.
T.
Murdoch, you ain't going to get me on no plane. And so they come out, and sure enough, the Syrians are gone, scattered. There's food just scattered along the way. And the people bring the food into the city. And in the same way the New Testament tells us to spread the good news, it comes from the same idea from the Old Testament here from Elisha, that when you have good news, God's mercy, God's kindness, God's forgiveness, when God provides for you that which you don't deserve in your time of need, when He loves you when you've been an outcast, when He loves you when you've been shunned, you shouldn't keep it to yourself. God wants us to share that with others. And so in Fast Track today, what we're going to discover is that God wants us not only to receive from Him, but also to give back to other people in need, whether that's financially, whether that's adoption, whether that's forgiving people the same way God forgave you, being patient to people.
Oh, that's a hard one.
Because God's been patient with you. that what God gives us is the source or resource for us to bless and be kind to others. So like the lepers in the story and like Elisha told us, the prophecy was fulfilled and they were able to eat, not for a month's wage, but for
for a day's
pennies on the dollar. Exactly.